Hey everybody. Another build challenge, this time on my build Acid Etch, centered around the Javelin Alpha. So on my build challenges, we try to take a non-meta item or a very uncommonly used item and make it best in slot on a build and see how far we can push it to perform. So the Javelin Alpha is interesting because it's usually substituted for the Majestic. Not only is the Majestic quite a bit lighter on EN, and despite its lack of stats, it actually has one feature which makes it much more reliable than the Javelin Alpha in that its proximity det is a little bit more, like the radius is a little bit longer. I believe it's 15 versus 10 meters. And so what ends up happening is that the Majestic is much more reliable against lightweights that are just bunny hopping and whatnot. And so it becomes hard to justify the Javelin Alpha when the Majestic is just so much more reliable. But I did figure out a way around that, and I'll get to that in a second. Before we go into that, let's take a look at just the stats breakdown between the two. So the Javelin Alpha technically has more impact, but because it hits in a detonation, and that impact is the total of all of those detonations, the initial hit is actually less impact than the Majestic. However, if you do stagger them with the Javelin Alpha, this does come with a nice caveat that those explosions get to take advantage of the higher direct hit adjustment of the Javelin Alpha. But if you're just looking to stagger an opponent, the Majestic is usually better just because its initial hit is higher impact than the Javelin Alpha, and against a lightweight, they're likely going to slip through the explosions without taking as much impact as the Majestic, where it might have already staggered them. But that aside, the Javelin Alpha performs better against tanks because of the high attack power, the higher actual impact, and they will likely eat the whole cloud. And then the slightly higher cumulative impact, though, that seems to be fairly marginal. And then the direct hit adjustment is much higher for this. So in other words, you want to run the Javelin Alpha when it's going to be your primary punish tool. It is heavier, and so you're going to have to make some weight compromises. But in order to make the lack of proximity detonation radius work, I found out that the real stat that matters is the jet duration of your booster. So the shorter your jet duration, the quicker that you cancel the first fake out shot with the Javelin Alpha, QB cancel it into the true shot. If you have a short jet duration, the lightweights, when they dodge, will end up dodging right into the follow-up shot and not having time to get enough distance on their follow-up QB to dodge the Javelin Alpha. So I would recommend either the Alula, the Brazel, which is interesting. This actually makes this heavier bazooka work better on some tanks as well. And the Gridwalker can also work, but as well as the SPD, but they're cutting a little close. So lastly, I would just say the Gills is probably the standout here. The Kikaku would work. The only problem is the Kikaku is just so bad at everything other than melee. And usually you don't want to run a bazooka or firing stance weapons on melee builds, but maybe you can come up with something there that's a little interesting. So the long and short of it is, if you're going to use a Javelin Alpha, you got to be using one of those typically lighter weight boosters, Brazel aside. Okay, so let's go through how to complement the Javelin Alpha in the weapons first. So I ended up picking the Rensetsu so that I could outspace Etsugens, and also the charge attack here does have a beep, but it has a really quick recovery after shooting and also quick charge up time, making it really good for mixing in those shots when your opponents start to read that you're going to do a fake out Javelin shot first and not dodging. So if you can start mixing in charged Rensetsu shots at the beginning before going for the Javelin Alpha, you can actually punish them for making a read on your Javelin Alpha, your Javelin Alpha charge shot into, or cancel into charge shot. Sorry, there's no charge shot on Javelin Alpha. Sorry, canceled shot into true shot with the Javelin Alpha. I did want to start getting better with some reverse joints, so I did end up putting this on a reverse joint, by the way. One thing with reverse joints, I feel like you need a shield because their QB to the side is so vulnerable and it takes so long to touch the ground. And you don't jump far enough really in this game. I hope they patch that in the future, but you don't realistically jump far enough to get out of close range most of the time. And so I feel like you need a shield anytime you're going to be running that, but especially because we have double firing stances here. Even with one firing stance, I would recommend a shield on a lightweight unless it's purely just for when the stagger punish goes off. But we actually used the Javelin Alpha earlier, trying to get some impact build up early, and then letting the Rensetsu finish him off. Oh, for arms, by the way, this is incorrect. Sorry, I still was testing these out. I do recommend the Nachtfire arms here, just because we need the help with the Walt on close range assist, so just for what little we get from firearm spec. The Javelin Beta I did struggle a lot with choosing a missile. The reason I ended up going with this one is more fake outs with the beeps that proc when the Javelin beta shoots. This does hurt us in long-range matchups like lamb kites and certain like rifle kites and whatnot, where we have to rush them down, but because of the limited range of the Javelin beta. But really, it doesn't seem to be a substitute for this missile. It gets around shields for those double Zimmerman builds. It's got reasonably fast reload speed, and our homing lock time isn't going to be too long with the Walt, giving us a little bit of specialization in missile lock correction, but for all intents and purposes, it's basically the listed stat. But yeah, the Javelin beta just works so well with the charge Rensetsu's triggering punishes for dodges, and the Javelin alpha also having a beat that they have to react on fairly quickly. Everything else about the core, well, actually, I'll come to the frame parts because those are usually last. The Alula, despite the QB reload penalty we're taking, is still the best just because we need the assault boost thrust for rifle kites and also the passive thrust speed of the Alula. I would recommend the SPD if they nerf the Alula, but until that day comes where they nerf the thrust in the Alula, we still need that assault boost thrust and passive boost speed. The QB reload also helps us do consecutive dodges. So when we jump in the air, if we don't have a quick follow-up dodge, a lot of times you can get punished on every leap. So we need the ability to do that. It does hurt us in the upward thrust, though, keep in mind. But that's okay, because this build doesn't really play upward very much. You don't want to go up into the air. The Walt and the Talbot were a tough choice, but the Walt is, we really just need that medium range assist to make the most out of the Javelin Alpha. And the Hakoshi helps us sponsor the frame parts here with enough capacity to chase down with assault boost when we're up against certain builds that backpedal us. Working from the frame part, like I said, I did want to work more on reverse joints, and bazookas do work nice with these just because you jump so far away, quote unquote far. It does help set up the bazookas with their proximity det, despite it being like it's limited, it has to go a certain distance before it activates. Knock arms for firearm spec, that's all we need. We don't really have much recoil issues with one Rensetsu, and the Javelin Alpha is only firing occasionally, so that was sensible. For Mesa Core, for stability and good booster efficiency, as well as strong EN supply efficiency support, the penalty that typically you get with the Fermeza and the EN recharge delay didn't hurt too much because of the Hakoshi generator. So, yep, for Mesa, just for ability to QB a lot with that expensive Alula. And then Cast Warhead was just because we had a lot of EN room, but we need lots of stability with this build to make the most of our shield. So just going for stability as much as possible while factoring in that the reverse joint legs are being used and the knock firearms are needed. Pulse armor should be pretty self-explanatory here. We don't have a follow-up punish if we cancel their pulse armor, so no need for that. Speaking of punish, though, don't forget to add the charged Rensetsu RF where and when you can, especially if like they're going for their pulse armor, but you staggered them with the Javelin Alpha and got the extra detonations off in before the if you procced the stagger with the Javelin Alpha, throw in a charged Rensetsu RF right at the end there for additional punish. And that pretty much covers all the parts. Let's go ahead and jump into some matches. Let's take a look at the different matchups. Here we got your classic double Zimmerman. Fortunately, this time the opponent has a melee weapon instead of a PS shield, which can make things a bit more complicated. But the general idea is just you got to parry the Zimmermans as much as possible and look to create space so that your shield is cooling as much as possible after the salvos. That would go for not blocking the missiles, though. You really need to save all the charges of the shield for blocking the Zimmermans, especially the staggering shots. Other than that, just using the Javelin beta to make sure you're getting some impact off of that when possible. Try to avoid launching the missile too early. And good spacing with the leaps leading into Javelin Alphas. You really do got to look for that opportunity to get the Javelin Alpha out between salvos wherever you can, because it is a race and the Zimmermans by default win most stagger races unless something complicates it for them. We'll take a look at Double Zimmerman PS Shield Laser Drone, the meta build that hasn't left since launch. Come on, FromSoft, nerf the cumulative impact to 100 on Zimmermans. I don't understand why this is so hard to get. But anyways, until they figure that out, it's a very tough matchup, not going to lie, and I lose this match, but it's still instructive to see how to handle it, because we do get quite close to winning the match. So, and this opponent is basically doing everything right, staggering the Zimmermans enough to make multiple charges on the PS Shield used up to parry. I think that one thing you can look for is a good opportunity to kick. Will help with these matchups, but all the same, keep in mind that a build this meta is usually a losing matchup unless the opponent makes mistakes anyways. So don't feel bad if you have a lot of trouble with this matchup. Again, looking for opportunities to fake out the Javelin Alpha into the true shot because we want to get around the PS Shield as well. You can also jump up and shoot down, which is interesting because the detonation is spread out a bit and that makes it slip behind the shield a lot. So another little tip to make it work against this matchup. Okay. Now granted, you usually don't want to go into the air because you really need that backwards jump distance in order to complicate their chase down. If you go up into the air, you're kind of like, sooner or later you got to come down, and that's really locking into the center of it. I messed up my missile a couple of times here, which also cost me the match. I fired it before the lock-in disappeared, and I also didn't get my energy back before popping the pulse on it, which gave away the tactical lead out there. Granted, I'm still in the healthy, so they have to chase me, but it's usually still not a good situation for Zimmerman chase downs when your pulse armor is popped, and this is not. Yeah, this upcoming salvo exchange here, just the oppressive pressure of the Zimmerman, you can really see why FromSoft needs to adjust the cumulative impact to make it so that the Zimmerman's good at breaking stagger, but not at building up stagger, because right now it does everything: stagger punish, stagger build-up, burst impact, stagger extensions, and direct hit punish. It's just a little bit oppressive, and anything that is basically easy to use or brainless should be low skill ceiling. So, low skill ceiling for performance. So if it's easy to use, it should not be viable at the highest skill tiers of meta. It should be the other way around. The harder it is to use, the better you should be able to perform if you perform perfectly with it. But Zimmermans are pretty brainless, just assault with focus, stagger your shots. That's basically it. So hopefully they fix the cumulative impact on them, because they are still like more than triple what they should be. Here we're looking at a Rensetsu, or I should just say rifle SMG combo with missiles. That's basically the meta. So main thing here is trying to stay out of range of the Etzogen unless they pressure, which will help us set up the Javelin Alpha. We're looking to try to make it so that they're deflecting their Etzogen if at all possible, and that we're just trading Rensetsus. And we're also looking to set up our Javelin Alpha where we can. Another thing to be mindful of too is if you can stall a little bit before you stagger them, it is wise because then you get your Javelin Alpha for punish. It's not that long of a reload, so it's usually not too hard unless the match is really close. You should be able to just delay that extra half second or whatever it takes to make sure your Javelin Alpha is on cooldown and get that stagger punish. Okay, so a lamb kite with AoE with the Rebula and Nebula. We're basically just looking to get the health lead here. We need to play very careful and not take an early missile salvo, so that we can dictate the fight and stay underneath cover. I'm going to use this map's little platforms to complicate it for the lamb kite. Also here, don't rush in. Make them chase you to burn off some of their battery before the fight starts, so that they cannot QB as often. Here the opponent knows what I'm doing, and so they're going to false drop there to try to bait me into rushing them, but I don't fall for it. So, not going to take much. Lambs do not have that much health. You just got to get a little bit of damage in, and then the fight can just play really defensive. The shield is not that great at blocking that plasma rifle, so the splash will usually go around quite a bit. So it's not enough to just dodge. I'm trying to keep medium range so that I can always jump out of the radius instead. Here I have a tank fight. I just skipped the first round just because otherwise it would just be too long of a clip for this one fight. The long story of this is just poke at range, QB backwards as much as possible during the initial stage of the chase down, and then just when they do get close, when you stagger them, don't get greedy for punishes. Just use the opportunity to assault boost away and get your own impact regenerated, if at all possible. But make heavy use of the Javelin Alpha. It's really good for staggering and building up stagger on tanks.
position at 50%.
Fortunately, this is a shield build, so stun guns are fairly self-explanatory. The only thing I would caution, other than just keeping the shield up during the entire firing, even if it's not the IG window of the shield, is be careful with height differences with reverse strength. It's easy to give them an opportunity to shoot from below or above and get around your shield that way. So you really want to try to not get too greedy with the jumping up. And if they go up, try to back off instead, like PB backwards. And just good shield management is the name of the game here. Don't forget to parry though. You do have a lot of deploys with this shield, so don't hesitate to refresh the block as long as you're not in the middle of a firing exchange with the, I think they still have magazine. Other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory. I wish I had the Javelin beta here. But it doesn't really make a difference. It's pretty self-explanatory. I did not expect the assault on it. I learned that next round to pop my pulse over and kind of save those, but caught me next round. Here we have a losing exchange at medium range because they've got the Harris and the Rensetsu plus the same missile, so we have to play aggressive in this matchup. We're not going to be able to play defensive. The shield's going to be tricky to make use around that Javelin beta, so I would just suggest focusing on blocking the Harris and the Rensetsu with your shield, and yes, that was basically the game. Again, still playing this this time, but landing the Javelin Alpha early gives me a huge lead up, and the kick is not a bad thing. Not super heavy, but it's enough. Fortunately, the opponent does not play aggressive enough here and lets me get my impact back for free. But can't always expect that, but yeah. Up next is a double SMG. So long and short of this is trying to spend as little time as possible in the effective range of the SMGs, try to cause them to flex. So we're going to use the jump distance combined with the Javelin Alpha to pressure. Every time we can get them in a medium range, we can go for Javelin Alpha shots while they try to rush us down. Pretty simple matchup here. The Rensetsu, I would argue, beats out the Curtis as a poking tool for impact buildup, just because the Curtis has got such bad accumulative impact. So with our Javelin Alpha, basically all I need to worry about is making sure I parry the Pulse Blade, and that's about it. Should be a fairly straightforward match. Another land build more defensively focused by firing laser drones nonstop and just having the Majestics as defensive tools. Long and short is we need to body them into the back of the map before we start spending too much of our energy. So we're just leaping and staying focused on not taking health damage while we get them their back to the wall. After that, it's pretty straightforward strategy. We basically just need to chip away their health with the Rensetsu, looking for a greedy opportunity. Ideally after their Majestics have fired to fire the Javelin Alpha, and then also making heavy use of the shield to parry the Majestics here, just because we don't want to spend too much energy dodging the whole time. We're going to need it to chase them down once their battery runs out. So that's kind of what I'm looking for here, is just stalling, chipping away health, waiting for that battery to run out, and then go for a Javelin Alpha. They may save some of their battery to do a dodge, at which point you want to fake out the Javelin Alpha, and then once they dodge, do the true shot there. But remember, your medium range is your strong range, so you don't want to get too close during this, or you can actually put yourself in a less likely situation to land the Javelin Alpha.